Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. All right, we are here with another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. I'm with my friend, Sheriff Andy Hughes. I don't know, is he still sheriff because you're running for re-election and you're you're kind of retired?
I think it's one of those titles that you couldn't shake it if you wanted to anyway. So
all right, so it's like Mr. President, even if you're not the president anymore?
Yeah, I guess right. Something like that.
So you are in Dothan, which is what county?
Houston County, Alabama.
Houston County, Alabama, which if memory serves is the bottom southeast corner of the state, right next to Georgia and Florida, right?
That's correct, yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into what we've got you on here for.
Yeah. Mickey, I'm a second-generation law enforcement officer. My father was a law enforcement officer for 36 years. I started my law enforcement career at the age of 18 in 1986 as a dispatcher with Houston County Sheriff's Office. Later,
what year? Did you say 86?
Yeah, 1986, okay. Yes. And I worked as a communications officer or dispatcher, and later I worked in the jail. Worked as a patrol deputy and then worked as a narcotics investigator. And in 1990, I left that position and took a job with the Dothan, Alabama Police Department. It's an agency of approximately 170 police officers. And I worked at Dothan PD from 1990 until 2006. And I was, out of those 16 and a half years I was at Dothan PD, I was a sergeant for 12 of those years. And served in a variety of roles in narcotics and vice unit for a large portion of that time. And the other portion of the time was in patrol. And then I was over special operations and training, SWAT. Got opportunity to get a lot of instructor certifications and firearms and tactics and that kind of thing. And then in 2006, I decided to run for sheriff and won against a three-term incumbent in my first race in 2006.
Wow.
And I ran for re-election in 2010 and won that election also. And near the end of my second term in August of 2014, about 5 months from the end of my second term, I was appointed as the Assistant Director for Homeland Security for the state of Alabama. Alabama was meshing all of its 12 law enforcement agencies into one agency, referred to as the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. And in that role, I served as a tactical commander. I was over the statewide SWAT team, the bomb team, and the aviation unit. So we were handling crisis situations all over the state of Alabama and gained a lot of valuable experience at that job. I retired in January of 2016, and I'm running for sheriff in Houston County this year.
So if memory serves, I think you told me in that capacity, one of your jobs was actually to create the statewide SWAT team, correct?
Yes. The state already had several part-time teams in different regions of the state. They'd never had a full-time team. So I was tasked with putting together a plan to come up with a full-time tactical team. And I did that. We implemented a full-time tactical team and kept 2 part-time teams, and one in the north end of the state, one in the south end of the state. And then we had a full-time team also, whose primary job was serving high-risk search warrants for the State Bureau of Investigation and assisting other agencies. But we also handled hostage situations, barricaded gunmen, the standard variety of tasks that a tactical team is expected to do.
How does like a situation unfolds? Who says whether it's the local county sheriff, the city police that happens in, your statewide agency that you guys created? Who gets the jurisdiction to go out and deal with the problem?
Well, a lot of times it just depends on where it happens and who gets there first sometime.
Okay.
It depends on some counties may have 5 or 6 deputies, and they don't have the capability to have a tactical team, a part-time tactical team, much less a full-time tactical team. But a larger city within that county may have a tactical team. A lot of times you see in areas that are not so populated, people put together regional teams, which are comprised of officers from multiple agencies and multiple jurisdictions, and they'll handle crisis situations within a defined geographical area. And then a lot of times, in the rural areas or areas that don't have the capability to have a tactical team, most every state has a tactical unit, and they'll provide assistance when called upon, especially. But most of the time, it's going to be up to the chief or the sheriff, whoever's actually in charge of that particular scene, and makes a call. And I've always urged people, listen, if you don't know, if you don't have the capability, call someone who does, okay? Because you want to make sure that you handle a hostage situation, a barricaded gunman situation, whatever. You want to make sure you handle that correctly and with the right tactics. And the last thing we want to do is have to take a life.
So why would the state have taken all those, you said 12 agencies?
Right. Mm-hmm.
What was the thought of putting them all together? I know in like my limited amount of government experience, the more you consolidate, the more stuff gets effed up is usually what happens.
Right. The main point when this legislation was put before the Alabama legislature, the main selling point was cost efficiency and cost savings. And I don't know that they've actually realized that cost savings yet. And I'm telling you, I was involved in part of that. And trying to mesh 12 agencies into one agency was one huge, giant headache. And it's still having some headaches, it's still having some growing pains there, but got a lot of great people, a lot of great men and women out of those 12 different agencies that were meshed together into one agency, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency.
Okay.
There's some great folks. They need some more funding. The state legislature in Alabama needs to make sure that they put funding toward state law enforcement in Alabama, because we have a terrible shortage of state troopers in the state of Alabama.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So you did that for a number of years.
Right.
Decided you wanted to go back to your hometown and become sheriff again, which is the race you're in right now. I've been communicating with you during your primary, which is coming up in June, right?
Yeah, June the 5th.
Okay, and then the general's in November.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mickey, when I took the position with the state, it was always my intent to come back and run for sheriff. I never left this county. Me and my family still resided in Houston County. I was just traveling either by vehicle or flying different places in the state, wherever I had to go on whichever day it was. And it was always my intent to come back and run for sheriff. But I saw the position as an opportunity to gain some very valuable experience. I've been fortunate enough to gain experience. I've had experience with a fairly large municipal agency. I have a supervisory command level experience at a municipal agency, a county agency as the sheriff himself, and command level experience at a state agency. So I've been very fortunate. I think there's a lot that I can bring to the table.
Heck yeah. As you're going through this process, you guys have got to be having some people say to you like, hey, you left, now you're coming back. I'm sure that comes up often, but everybody always wants to go home, right? It's kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I ask people, don't be short-sighted. Think about the big picture and think about who is the candidate that has the most experience to carry Houston County forward into the future. We have to prepare for the emerging threats to our society and our way of life. And I think I've got the knowledge, the skill, and ability to carry Houston County into the future and to do that. I read something interesting the other day. I think there's somebody I follow on Instagram, as you probably do. It's called 30 Seconds Out. And I saw a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase this on that Instagram account the other day. And it said, let's don't train for the seen, train for the unseen. Okay, we've got to train for what we haven't seen yet, what we have not experienced yet. And people may say, well, these are things that are happening overseas in Israel or other countries in Europe, or is happening in New York City or San Francisco or Houston, Texas. But, any city in America today is a target. And I don't care how big or how small your agency is, you need to train for every threat that you can possibly train for. And you need to seek out that training. And so many times training gets stale in law enforcement. We do the same things over and over, and it's repetitive and all. We need to make sure that we're getting high speed training that is that's efficient and that's actually pertinent to our jobs on a daily basis.
We just had a shooting here in Illinois this morning, Dixon High School. I don't know if you saw that in the news or not. 19-year-old former student walked in with a gun, shot at the resource officer who drew and shot the kid and put him down. Didn't kill him, thankfully. Nobody else was hurt, but that stuff happens way too often.
Go ahead. I've been on the scene and have been involved in two active shooter situations. One was in a medical office. We had an individual who was on some medication. He walked into a medical office here in Dothan back in 2007, right after I took office as sheriff, and walked in the office with a military helmet on and an M1A.
Oh, wow.
Walks in the office and starts firing. Fired 7 rounds, I believe it was, inside this medical office. Luckily, had a couple people that sustained some shrapnel wounds and some wounds from some doors splintering and that kind of thing. But nobody was actually shot. And
Wow.
we just thank the Lord for that. We ended up being able to evacuate the rest of the people out. Had one guy that was still left in the structure, and he was in a crawl space above the bathroom. And we ended up talking this guy out and rescuing that remaining individual who was inside. Had another active shooter situation at a nightclub in the western part of our county, where an individual was thrown out of the bar, went out to his vehicle, got a Glock 26, and went back into the, matter of fact, he confronted the owner's son of the club, and this guy was ambushed, never saw him. He pumped several rounds into him, shot and killed him at the front door.
Oh, no.
Went inside the structure and chased down the dancer that he was fondling. And, the reason he was thrown out, chased her into a bathroom, shot and killed her, went to the back area of the club and shot 2 more individuals. We had 4 people shot, three killed, and like 11 different crime scenes within the structure. And we captured this guy. This happened around 11 p.m. at night, and we captured him just before daylight the next morning, about a mile and a half from the club on foot. In the woods.
Is that the story you told me once when we talked about the guy that you guys caught him running across a cotton field or something?
Well, I don't remember. This guy was in a wooded area. He was really cut up too. He'd actually and going to the point of some other stuff I know you want to talk about here in just a little bit. Matter of fact, one thing that assisted us in catching this guy who had committed a triple homicide, he shot 4 people, killed 3 of those people that he shot, was the owner of the club was in his trailer just behind the structure. Somebody called him and told him what was going on. And as the bad guy was fixing to get into his car and leave, and we may have never known what type of car he was on, but the owner of the club actually engaged him from the porch of his trailer and shot at the guy. The perpetrator shot at him, which caused him to abandon the vehicle, left the handgun there at the vehicle, and took off running into the woods. So, we had him contained there on foot. We had a good perimeter set up, and I just had to work that perimeter all during the night and call him right before daylight the next morning. But we had an armed citizen who was able to intervene. It was after the fact that 3 people were already dead and another injured. But due to that armed citizen having a handgun, he actually assisted us in being able to catch the perpetrator a little quicker than we probably would have caught him.
Mm-hmm. That illustrates the point that we pass on to our students is you're dealing with seconds, not minutes or hours. And people, of course, we always want to call the law enforcement and let them know what's going on. Of course, we always want trained professionals to deal with these problems, but some guy walks up and just starts shooting people. You don't have the time to even make phone calls. Life and death. That sucks. No. Terrible. Those people lost their lives over that. Yeah. And you can't, I'm sure when that guy walked in the bar that evening, nobody knew in an hour or 2, this guy's going to get crazy and start killing people. It sucks. Right. Yeah. So that was what you mentioned a moment ago. One of the things that we wanted to talk about, some of the stuff that I wanted to make sure we impressed upon people is what a constitutional sheriff is. So we talked about this earlier before we began. I think a lot of people don't know that sheriff is elected versus a police chief or some other type of appointed official. So we'll talk about that for a minute. And I think a lot of folks don't understand that a sheriff is the highest elected official in a county anywhere in the United States, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. Explain that to the listeners so they understand.
Yeah, so, the role of the sheriff goes back to medieval England back to 1066. The position back then was actually called a shire reeve, and eventually that turned into being a sheriff. And we've had sheriffs here in the United States for, since the beginning of our time as a nation. But a sheriff is an elected official in most counties. There are several counties in the United States where the sheriffs are appointed, but they're very, very few. And Alaska has no sheriffs because they have no counties in Alaska. So, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, little trivia for you there. But anyway, a sheriff is the highest law enforcement official in their particular county. There's over 3,000 counties within the United States of America. So we've got over 3,000 sheriffs who serve their communities here in the United States. Police chiefs are appointed. The head of the state law enforcement agencies are appointed. The head of the FBI is appointed. Every U.S. Marshal for every district in every state of the United States is appointed. And the sheriff is the only top law enforcement official that the people themselves get to select as their chief law enforcement officer. So the people get to pick a sheriff.
And that picking that person, or male or female, is so very important because of the sway you guys have on the constitutional rights of the citizens in your particular county. You brought up Alaska has no sheriffs. I did not know that. I have seen Denver, Colorado. Their sheriff does nothing but manage the jail. They've got an interesting scenario. And then I was just in South Carolina. What county was that? Horry County, Horry. Horry County has an police chief that is the county chief and an elected sheriff. Sometime, like I guess right after the Civil War, they had some kind of fight between politicians. So they're like, all right, screw this. We're going to create this county-wide police department because apparently the sheriff had some sway that they didn't like. So to this day, they have a elected sheriff and a appointed police chief that both have county-wide agencies. Pretty interesting. But
there's several counties in Georgia too, around the Atlanta metro area. Sometimes you'll have the DeKalb County Police, DeKalb County Sheriff, and that kind of thing. And some areas the sheriff is relegated to duties such as being an officer of the court, handling civil processes, transporting prisoners, and being the custodian of the county jail.
Okay. And
our sheriffs in Alabama, we're general law enforcement officers, and we're responsible for law enforcement throughout our counties, and you're responsible for running a county jail also.
Now, some counties also, the sheriffs do the job of the coroner.
I've heard of that too. We have a coroner for each county in Alabama too.
Okay. Our state does as well, but I believe some areas don't have the resources or something. So this whole notion of constitutional or a constitutional sheriff, to me, when I explain that, to me it means that the elected official follows the letter of the Constitution as it was written, the letter of the law, and doesn't interpret it based on maybe the modern political sway or leanings of the constituents, but he or she, is that how you would phrase it, something like that?
Yes, I mean the Constitution is the basis for all of our laws. Basically, here in the United States, the Constitution sometimes is interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court. We don't always agree with that interpretation, and when the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution, then what's created then is case law, and we have to follow case law also in addition to the Constitution. But the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is probably the single most important document. Besides the Declaration of Independence in our country, it gives us a basis of what our inherent rights are as Americans. And the First Amendment guarantees free speech and freedom of the press. And I don't always agree with what somebody else has to say. I don't always agree with what the press has to say, but I always have to respect that viewpoint. Do I have to listen to that viewpoint? No. And a lot of times we get some people that are far left liberal or left wing, and they think that freedom of speech only works one way.
Andy, we lost our video feed of you. All right, you were saying?
Yeah. But, sometimes you get some people the far left, and they think that freedom of speech is only a one-way street. It's a two-way street. I mean, just because you've got something to say doesn't mean that I have to listen to it, and vice versa. But you have the right to express yourself.
Sure, sure.
And as a sheriff, whether I like it or not, I have to defend that person's right to free speech. And, we've got the Second Amendment, which without the Second Amendment, I don't think we could defend any of the other 9. And we need to make sure that we always defend the Second Amendment. And a lot of people get caught up in that, well, people have rights to have guns for hunting. And it is an inherent right as an American for us to have guns if we want to hunt. I love to hunt. Being in Southeast Alabama here, we do all kinds of hunting. We're country boys here, and we definitely do that. But the Second Amendment was not based upon somebody's hunting rights. It was based upon us as Americans' rights to defend ourselves against tyranny, basically. And then that's evolved into being able to defend ourselves against criminals also. So, as a sheriff in my county, as a 30-year career law enforcement veteran and an administrator, I want every law-abiding citizen in my county that feels comfortable carrying one. I want them to carry a gun. I want them to possess a gun. I want them to feel comfortable in using that gun if they have to in defense of their life or the lives of others. We during my first 2 terms as sheriff, we had 4 justifiable homicides here in Houston County. And, if we got time, I'd like to go over the details on each one of those and what happened.
I would like to cover that. So you're not scared as a elected official. This will be broadcast all over the internet. Sure. You're not scared to have the public hear you say, good Lord, there's a sheriff, a law enforcement official, a man elected by the people saying he thinks everybody should have guns. That doesn't bother you?
No, every law.
Of course it doesn't, because you said it, but.
Right, yeah. I mean, if you're not forbidden, if you're not a convicted felon, and you haven't had your rights restored, and you're not forbidden to own or possess a firearm because of mental illness or previous crimes that you've committed, or you're an illegal alien, or any of those things that all of us have seen on the ATF form 4473 when you bought a gun from a licensed firearms dealer. If you're not prohibited from having one, I want every law-abiding citizen in my county to have one and carry it if they feel comfortable doing so.
I like that. Your discussion a moment ago on the importance of all of our civil liberties. I have a presentation that we give on that to basically illustrate to people that none of that stuff is, it's not interpretation. It's not Andy's interpretation or Mickey's. They wrote those things out, spelling it out for a very specific reason, to make it clear to the reader, to the citizen. And I think too often, like going on right now, you've probably seen some of this stuff, like Costco recently is they've had that charity that they run. There's a company in Southern California. I think it's called Black Rifle something. They're a Black Rifle sales company. They sell to like law enforcement agencies in Southern California. Every year they donate $500 to this charity for Costco. Costco mailed them the check back because their logo is an AR. And so they said that they were very scared that it would bother other sponsors and other patrons. So this guy's like got national, let me see if I can look it up right now. He's got like national attention. NRA picked it up. Some news outlets picked it up. And it's this notion that now a legal law-abiding company that actually supplies police departments with the weapons that go in their squad cars, that their existence is no longer lawful because, here it is, I found it, because somebody has this bad feeling. Let's see, here it is. It's if somebody wants to look it up, the company's called Sacramento Black Rifle. So they're in Northern California. And he posted this up on his Instagram account. He posted the picture of the letter that Costco sent him. It says, pursuant to Costco Wholesale Regional Office direction, please find your company's check for $500 made out to Costco, blah, 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 talking about the donation. They sent it back to him because they decided that it was something that was scary. So the guy goes on to say, though, the owner of the store, he goes, it's funny that Costco allows breweries, liquor stores, marijuana dispensaries to display their banner, just to name a few, but they sent this generic letter to me, and it's a shame that someone was so offended by this Sacramento Black Rifle Company that now it has to come to this. So Fox News, CNN, NBC News, a bunch of these different outlets picked it up. See if I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but if you want to look it up, it's same kind of thing. So like, I don't like XYZ church, so now I want to boycott that church. I can't do that. Or I don't like you based on your sexual persuasions. doesn't matter. That's not how it works. And myself personally, I'll protect somebody's right to who they want to marry, what church they want to go to, what kind of flag they want to fly in their yard, as long as it's not injurious to me or my family or to others. I have no issue with that. But too many people nowadays look at their misunderstanding. I had a family member over once that left a family party because they found out about a gun that we had here. She came up to me and goes, "Is it true that there's an AK-47 in this house?" and I was like, "Yeah." Like, her son had said that he saw one, and this thing wasn't out in the open. I was showing some people some guns, and it was locked up. But she took her family and left. Just the idea that she was in a building with this thing, even though it was unloaded, locked up, it made her so fearful that she packed up and left. So, like, that's the one side of the equation where that person would hear what you said and just think, "Oh my God, like this guy's the devil," not thinking that in reality it's the opposite. You defend that person's right to their irrational notions, right?
Right, exactly. You know, I think in this country we worry sometimes. I don't worry, but you know, and if everybody likes you, you apparently haven't done anything in your life that means anything. But you know, we worry too much about offending people. I mean, just because I don't like something doesn't mean I'm going to be terribly offended by it. I'm just not going to pay attention to it. Okay, maybe
Sure.
I won't shop there. Maybe I won't buy a certain product or whatever. I know these companies are out to make a profit, but if they worried about everything that offended everybody, then they would have very little stuff on their shelves, especially in a huge retail store.
Heck yeah. Yeah, exactly. This company uses a product that comes from a country that I don't agree with certain laws. I'm not buying that. Yeah. That stuff we've created a situation where everybody has to feel good about everything, which of course that's a wonderful thing, but that's just not the reality of living. Right. So let's talk about some of those scenarios. We have had good lead into this is I just finished a couple videos on concealed carry or armed citizen insurances. And we spent 18 months researching that. And it's interesting. One of the reasons I wanted to put that out there is people have this notion that if you use a firearm for legal self-defense, you're going to jail. You're getting arrested. You're being prosecuted. And does that happen? For sure. But not very often. Like, I have this idea that if it happens, some other thing was part of the equation that this person isn't telling you. And so you have 4 instances where somebody lawfully and legally, unfortunately, had to use a firearm for the protection of life. Let's hear those.
That's correct. You know, the first thing, and all 4 of these justifiable homicides that we had during my first 2 terms as sheriff, I was at every single one of those. One of them, I was actually out working and was only 3 or 4 miles from the incident when it happened. You know, our first job, Mickey, when we respond to a scene like that, even if it's, you know, appears to be a justifiable homicide, the first thing we need to do is we need to find out what the truth is first. And then, secondly, I need to make sure that victim, and I'm calling these people a victim, even though you may have a dead guy here on the scene, the lawful citizen using his firearm in a lawful manner, according to his Second Amendment rights, he is the true victim. He or she is the true victim on these type of crime scenes. The first one that we had an individual, and I actually knew this guy. He was employed with a large employer here in our county. This guy was the last person in the world that would ever want to take someone's life. He was alone at his house one night. The house was kind of dark. His 80-something-year-old mother was in the rear portion of the house. She was confined to a bed, had Alzheimer's real bad. He heard a loud noise, and this guy had a lot of guns in his house. Most of them were all locked up. He was a big collector. But he retrieved a Smith & Wesson 38 2-inch Model 36. I think as a matter of fact, it was 37 is a stainless model, I believe. He retrieved his handgun and found 2 individuals in his bedroom going through his wife's jewelry.
Wow.
Well, he got these individuals at gunpoint. He called 911. He backed them back into a den at gunpoint. They were not armed. He backed them into a den area at gunpoint, had both of them thrown out, and he's on the phone with 911, telling him his name, what was going on. And then you hear him say on the 911 tape, no, don't get up, don't get up, don't get up. And about that time, one of the guys, and these two individuals were brothers, and one of them popped up off the floor and started toward him. And he was in fear for his life. There were two of them. They were much larger individuals than he was. He fired a shot, and the individuals took out and run out the door. But when I got on the scene, I talked to the victim. He said, I fired one shot. He said, I don't think I hit him. And we went outside, got looking around, and started finding some small specks of blood on the concrete driveway area outside the house. I called for our bloodhounds to come to be able to track this individual if we needed to. And myself and a Dothan police officer started tracking the blood trail. So we lost the blood trail, but kept following a path behind the house. And we found the individual, one of the perpetrators. We found him deceased about 60 yards from the victim's residence. We knew that there were two individuals there, so we started looking for the other individual. And the other individual, which was a brother, he makes a phony 911 call and says his brother's called him on his cell phone and says somebody has shot him in a field, in this area. And he actually shows back up to the scene with his parents. And when he shows back up to the scene, I get to looking at this guy, and I see some specks of blood on his clothing. So at that point, we pat him down and say, hey, have a seat in the back of the car here for just a minute. Turned out they were brothers. They had ran when one individual got shot. He could not get his brother to the vehicle at this church. They had parked behind a church about 400 yards away from the house, and he wasn't able to get his brother back to the vehicle to get him out of there. So he left him and went back home, showed back up with the parents. But when the victim in this case, when he fired around, it hit the perpetrator in the hip area, severed his femoral artery, and like I said, he only got about 60 yards before he bled out, and where we found him deceased on the ground. And this is the first case, and like I said, this individual was the last guy in the world anybody would ever think would want to shoot somebody, much less actually take a human life.
So stupid. I mean, it's so stupid that it had to, some young man, some parents had to lose a kid, but stay down, cops are coming to deal with the judge and jury. You have a breaking and entering home invasion. Right. Now you're dead. now you're dead. That's so stupid. How is he?
In the state of Alabama, the brother, the one that got away and came back to the scene, he was actually charged with murder in his own brother's death due to the statute in Alabama, which allows you to charge somebody with murder if their actions end up causing their death.
I think I remember you telling me that. So did he end up being convicted of that?
Yes, he was convicted. He's in prison now.
How long will he be in prison for?
Mickey, I don't remember the actual sentence that he got. In Alabama, our sentencing guidelines are pretty stiff on that. And I don't recall exactly what his criminal history was that would aid the judge and using the guidelines to sentence him. But I guarantee you spending more than 20 years in Alabama prison.
Was there any civil repercussions from the family to the property owner, the victim?
No, none that I know of whatsoever.
Okay, so they didn't try to go and say, you killed our son. He was just trying to get away and go home, and no?
There's no civil action in any of these cases that I'm aware of whatsoever.
Okay, okay. So that one was case closed. The evidence was there. You guys probably had all kinds of physical evidence of them both being in the house.
Right, we did. Yeah.
Okay.
We did. The second incident that we had an individual. It was an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend kind of situation. New boyfriend is over with his girlfriend at her mobile home, and several other individuals in the house. Ex-boyfriend is intoxicated. He comes to the house, tries to force his way in, and they're telling him to leave, go on, and get out of here. He eventually breaks out the small window in the mobile home door, the back door leading into the kitchen area, busted that out, reached in, unlocked the door, and came into the residence. In this situation, the victim in this case, he backed all the way up. He backed out through the kitchen. He backed down a hallway. He backed into a bedroom area. So he actually retreated, which is not really required in the state of Alabama under the Castle Doctrine here in the state of Alabama. But this individual did. He retreated to the furthermost point that he could retreat to, and this individual kept coming at him. And he shot him 3 different times. Got 3 non-lethal hits, and the last hit went into this individual's head, in his nasal area, And when he shot him, the individual was able to retreat back to the kitchen area in the mobile home, and he fell dead there in the kitchen area.
Wow. So that was another call that you went out on?
Right.
And
correct. I was actually out working the night that one happened also.
And you were sheriff then?
Yes, yes.
So you're a hands-on guy. You're not back at the homestead.
You know, you have to do your administrative work and do that. If you don't get your administrative work done, nothing else can get accomplished in your agency. But I was a hands-on, definitely a working sheriff, and you know, I'd be out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sometime on weekend nights, working with my deputies and just backing them up and seeing what's going on in the county at that time of the night. You know.
Traits of a good leader. So same thing, that scenario, you already said it. No civil charges or not civil charges, but civil.
Any kind of action, no civil action was taken.
Okay.
This file that I'm aware of there.
So that's number 2.
Yeah, that's number 2. Number 3 is an important one here because we got 2 different situations we need to talk about. And if the individual would have been struck during the first altercation, it would have been a little bit different story. At another domestic situation, ex-husband situation, the victim in this case, his daughter was living in a camper trailer behind his residence. Her ex came over, bashed out the windows of the camper, and had a confrontation with him. And the victim in this case actually fired some shots at this individual as he was running away.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't hit him. He didn't hit him, shot at him with a .22 rifle, I believe, and did not hit the individual. He got away. I was out working this night too, and it was Saturday night. And I actually responded to the residents on the first call. And anyway, the guy ended up, he kept harassing the girl. He kept calling. He told him, he said, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to come over and kill her. I got home about 4 o'clock or so that morning, got a call around 6, waking me up and get me to respond back to that residence over there. They said, hey, the guy's dead over here now. Well, he called several times, told me he was going to come over and kill the girl. The father sat on the porch with his .357 Magnum revolver. This individual pulled up. He's got another guy in the truck with him, and steadily telling him, don't go up there, don't go up there. And he approaches. The father comes off the porch, stands in the front yard. He approaches him, pulls a knife on him right there in very close proximity to him in the front yard. And he shot him one time in the chest with a .357 Magnum. And
wow.
So he was deceased right there in the front yard.
Wow.
Yeah. In number 2 and number 3 here, alcohol is a factor. Some of these guys, I believe, had some courage in a can, and they did things that maybe they normally wouldn't have done. But that does not negate the fact that these victims, these individuals, had to exercise their Second Amendment rights in defense of their life or the life of others.
That's, it comes down to it. That's something we talk about with students often. I just don't think I could ever do that. You say that, but if it means you dying, leaving your family, father or motherless, versus some scumbag that's trying to take your life from you or inflict grave damage to you, it's kind of a no-brainer to me. I don't want to do it, but
I tell people, I said, before you purchase a gun, before you decide to carry a firearm with you, you need to know in your heart. You've got to search your soul. And you've got to ask yourself this question before. You cannot wait until the moment of truth arrives to decide whether or not you can take a human life in defense of your own or the defense of others. You've got to make up your mind before that comes, because it's going to be an involuntary reaction. You're either going to do it or you're not. And if you have an individual, and in one of these cases, you had an individual that 2 individuals, they were unarmed. We
lost video again, Andy.
In one of these cases, we had 2 individuals who were unarmed. In another case, we had an individual that only had a knife. So if you've got a gun and you can't use that gun, you can't bring yourself to use that gun in defense of yourself, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to take that gun away from you who already doesn't have one. And then they're going to create harm or death to you or maybe one of your loved ones. So you got to make up your mind before you ever purchase a firearm for self-defense purposes. Hunting is one thing, but if you're going to purchase one for self-defense purposes, you need to know in your heart that you can actually use that to take a human life if you have to.
That's a good point about it being used against you. I'll add to that, it could be used against somebody else down the road as well. We just had the newspaper reported it as an accidental discharge, which I don't believe in. It was
There's only negligent discharges.
Yeah.
An accidental.
Right on.
Right.
And what they found out after the cops got there, it was that we have a beautiful town square here in our community it's idyllic. The person that discharged the firearm was a teenage kid, little gangbanger punk. Him and his buddies stole the gun, and they were trying to figure out how to use it so that they could use it to rob somebody. This just happened a couple days ago, and they didn't even know enough about it to figure out if it was loaded or not, and the kid pulled the trigger and shot it. Luckily, nobody got hurt. Cops picked them up right away, and now all of them, they figured out where they stole them from. But that stuff happens all the time. So it's going to get used against you, and then that person is going to probably leave with it, and it's going to end up on the street and be used.
Another crime.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility. So how about the last one?
Yeah. The last one was kind of interesting. We think that this individual was probably going to kidnap his victim and take her off and kill her. There's another domestic situation, ex-husband, ex-wife kind of deal. Guy walked about 2.5, 3 miles in the dead of night. He showed up at his ex-wife's mobile home. He had a key to the mobile home, and he had the keys to her car and a backpack, and he had some duct tape also. And he was armed with a .45. He went into the trailer, and when he got in, there was a guy sitting or laying on the couch asleep. And this was a neighbor. He was just over there because the female was actually very scared of her ex-husband. This guy was on the couch, no romantic involvement or anything. So he confronts this guy. The girl comes out of the bedroom. And I think at this point, he had two victims here instead of one. So he's trying to decide, what to do at this point. So he takes them at gunpoint into the kitchen. He smokes a cigarette. They talk about things for a while. He gets tired of his ex being there, and she's wearing nothing but a T-shirt, And he says, "Listen, I want you to go in the bedroom. I want you to get some pants on. I don't like you being in front of this guy with no pants on." So he takes her, forces her and the guy into the bedroom, and she goes into the drawer to get her a pair of pants, and she comes out with her own handgun at that point, and they're in a gun battle across the bed in the bedroom.
Wow!
He actually hits her with a .45 on the side of the head. She ended up losing one eye and part of her forehead here. She fired back at him. She hit him center mass, and he turned to run and get out the door and collapsed before he could get out the front door. And she's still alive today, though, even though she has some bad physical problems. Don't have an eye on one side and that kind of thing. She is still alive, to tell the story today. But that was another bad situation. That was the fourth justifiable homicide that we had here in Houston County. And like I said, I was at all of those scenes. We went there to find out what the truth was, and then we made sure that those gun owners' rights were not violated, and that they did have. We wanted to make sure that we let everybody know that they did have the right, and they exercised that right to defend themselves or others.
That lady had a will to win. Most people would not have been shot in the face and continued fighting. That's fantastic.
I mean, this is across the distance, across a queen size bed. They got a gunfight going on.
That's crazy. So, my takeaway from that, twofold. One, be prepared when I come to your community, because there's a lot of gunfights. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's actually, over that many years, that's probably pretty much below a lot of big communities' averages for that kind of stuff. But my takeaway is I am certain, knowing you, that if there was some type of evidence that showed that any of these victims in these cases were not truly victims, you would not have protected them for no reason. So you found out, based on the evidence that was available to you, and your investigators found these people were indeed victims, and so you did what you were supposed to do and protected them under the law. That happens in a lot of places, and a lot of places it does not, based on local political. I mean, we see it all the time with these high profile cases, especially with police officers, and it's amazing to me the attorneys for families taint the jury pool. They taint public opinion by releasing misinformation or releasing little tidbits of information. And then people don't realize, the general public don't realize, that the police departments or sheriff's office is not rebutting certain things because they can't. they can't release their information. So average citizen says, well, if it wasn't true, why wouldn't the agency make a statement? They can't. That's not, and that's like that. I just want to mention that because people hear these stories and they think, like in your situation, oh, he must have known those people that he protected them. No.
Maybe it just boils down to one thing, and that's doing the right thing. Do what's right. And the thing about it is, as a sheriff, you are an elected official, but after you're elected, I don't know who voted for me and who really didn't vote for me. But after the fact, even after I'm elected, it doesn't matter. You're the sheriff for every individual in your county. You're the sheriff for every individual that visits your county or passing through your county. So you can never let politics come into play with what the right thing to do is. If you just do the right thing, you're on the right track.
That's awesome. That's a good. I think if you do that in any area of life, you'll be better off.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, I wish I could say I always did the right thing. I try, but sometimes, sometimes it doesn't seem to work out. Yeah. So you guys are weeks away now from your
20 days. Yeah.
20 days.
Right.
And you're going to crush it, of course, and then go on to the general where you'll win that. That's fantastic. You have any closing or parting words? I'd probably, after your election's over and you've got some room to breathe, because I know you've got to get out on the street tonight. You're going to go knocking on doors, making sure people know to vote for you. Any parting words that you'd like the listeners to know, not just about you in general, but about looking for good candidates for sheriff in their community?
I just want to make sure every American, it's our inherent right to cast a secret ballot in this country. Nobody but you and the Lord are going to know who you actually voted for. So you need to make sure that you make an educated vote. Don't just think, well, I like this guy's name, or I like the way this guy or this lady looks, or, I think this guy's commercial was cool, or whatever. Make sure you do your research on every individual candidate and make an educated decision before you cast your ballot. And a lot of people say, well, my one vote doesn't count. But you get in some smaller communities. There's one county that's adjacent to us. The sheriff's race back in 2014 came down to 8 votes.
Wow.
8 votes. So
we had that same thing here. We have, I forgot how many total votes were cast, but my candidate, who's been the sheriff now for 4 years, we're going to have our general in November, and he doesn't have an opponent, so he'll win another term. But when we beat the incumbent in the primary 4 years ago, it came down to, I want to say 70 votes out of 100,000. And I sat for 2 weeks at our county clerk's office every day as they recounted each and every vote, which was painfully brutal for me to sit there. But yeah, to your point, man, that is, everybody says, not everybody, but you hear people say, I'm not going to bother, or I'll go vote in the general. My vote doesn't matter. Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, you need to vote in every election that comes around. You need to have a voice in your local government. And like they say, all politics are local. And I can tell you, I've worked at state level in government. I worked at the county and municipal level. I've done a lot of work with the federal agencies and all. And I'm going to tell you, the best government, the best services does not get accomplished in Washington, D.C. They don't get accomplished in Montgomery, Alabama, or any other state capital. But they get accomplished right there at your local level, where you and your government officials can make the decisions that are best for your local community right there. So, you need to make sure that you go out and vote in every single election, and make sure you make an educated vote before make an educated decision before you actually cast that ballot.
That's huge. And like I use organizations like, depending on what your important issues are. I'm having a hard time phrasing what I was trying to say there. Be it gun rights, birth rights, marriage rights, whatever they are. Go to the organizations that you support, and usually those organizations have sent questionnaires or done interviews and say, what does Sheriff Hughes, what's his stance on gun rights? And or go to one of your campaign meetings and ask. Sir, I got a question. How do you feel about the Second Amendment rights? Ask, because that's the person you got to deal with. I'm with you.
Get involved. And, a candidate that is truly looking out for the best interest of his constituents will not mind you asking them a question. They will not be offended if you ask them a question. I mean, people need to know. I mean, they want to know how the government operates. They want to know where you stand on things. And I've always tried to make myself accessible and wanted people to feel comfortable with me when they approach me. We have 105,000 population in our county. It's a fairly, good-sized county. And, people, when I first got elected in 06, people would say, well, hey, Andy, and then they'd say, oh, I need to call you sheriff. And I said, no, just call me Andy. I just happen to be the sheriff. I'm just Andy, and that kind of thing. But I've always wanted to be approachable and accessible to the people. And that's the way every politician or office holder should be, any elected official should be. And they should not be offended when you ask them about what their stance or their position is on any issue.
I agree. Yeah. And that, I think you just that as a indicator, when you ask somebody and they don't have the answer, don't want to respond to you, or standoffish, or give you the beat around the bush kind of an answer, that should tell you a lot about how that person's going to lead.
Yeah.
But that's you correct. Said it a moment ago, you got to get involved, otherwise you won't know.
That's correct.
Amen. Yeah. I appreciate that you took the time to do this. I appreciate that there's men like you, women like you. I know you're going to do good in the upcoming 2 elections. I'm sure we'll talk before then, but kick some butt. Have a good walk this evening, knocking door to door.
I will. I encourage people, if you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at lawman01, and on Facebook it's just Andy Hughes, or my campaign website, which they pretty much got the same content on both sites. It's at Andy Hughes for Sheriff. And I encourage you to follow me on both of those social media platforms and interact with me there if you'd like to.
Fantastic. I think that's what you just brought up is a super valid point. Even though not everybody lives in Houston County, Alabama, if we support these people abroad, you're a friend of mine, you live 1,000 miles from me. I've got various friends that do what you do in these different areas, and I help support them. Even though I don't live there and don't vote there, it's going to help drive people to you that do live in your community and help put people like yourself into the public purview where they can see, okay, not every politician's some cigar smoking, side mouth talking guy. So that's not you, is it?
No, it's not
me. I appreciate your time, sir. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mickey. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye now.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.